Hello guys and welcome back. In this video what we're going to be doing is fixing or repairing the latex paint and the caulk that is torn away from the top of the crown molding where the crown meets the ceiling here. Okay, so what I can tell is that this is a latex paint. It's not an oil paint, so it's not going to be as brittle. Once again, when the house starts to settle with the joists and whatnot, the crown molding is attached to not only one wall but two walls, the ceiling too. So when the house starts to settle, the crown molding is going to move. Okay, and sometimes what happens is the caulk, when the crown was put up, it was caulked and then painted. And when the crown starts to move, if you don't use a good enough caulk, then it'll crack and tear. And that's what you're seeing here. You're seeing the latex paint and the caulk just tear from when the crown it had moved. So we're going to fix all these areas here because you can't just caulk over that and then paint over it because it's going to look like you just did that. Because the latex paint has started to unfurl. Okay, so it's coming out and there's all these gaps, so it has to be cut out. So I'm going to be using my Stanley. This is the Instant Change. It's a high quality utility knife and it's great for jobs like this. I have my sandpaper here. It's 60 grit and the name of it is Gator Grit. And it's great too. So the 60 grit, you can use 80 or 120, but I really want to sand away any of the loose parts of the caulking and the latex paint. So that's why I'm going with a more abrasive grit here. And then I have two flexible blades here. This is 1.5 inches and this is a 4-inch. Okay, so I'm gonna go around the room and fix all these. So I hope you have fun watching. We'll see you in a few. Okay guys, so welcome back here. In this video, what we're going to be doing is cutting away the loose or peeling paint and caulk that has torn away from the top of the crown molding where the crown, it meets up against the ceiling. We'll get in close there and you can see that there is a huge gap that is underneath it. And again, this is caused from when the house starts to settle. It starts to pull away from the ceiling and the wall, and you're going to get that. So the tools for the job is my Purdy 1.5 inch putty knife. I have my Stanley Instant Change high quality utility knife. And lastly, we're going to be using the Gator sandpaper in its 60 grit. Okay, so I'm going to score a line above the crown where the crown meets the ceiling. Okay, and then I'm going to use my putty knife to try to get underneath it. Okay, and at this point I can either use my putty knife or the utility knife to rescore it if I have to, like I'm doing so now, so that it'll hopefully just come off in one big piece like it does there. So that is the back side of it. Okay, and now I'll further work on the area to like the left there. Okay, and then with the utility knife, just try to cut away anything that is still loose or unfurled. Now I'll grab my 60 grit sandpaper, and I want to use a coarse grit just to be able to sand away any of the loose or peeling paint. Again, this is a latex paint. This isn't a oil-based paint. So if it was an oil-based paint, the paint would be much more brittle than a latex paint. So as you can see, I sanded away all that hard edge of the remaining latex paint that was on the surface. So we'll come over to like the right over here, and again I will score a line where the crown meets the ceiling there. And it's always nice to try to get it in one shot, but obviously we don't live in a perfect world, so you may have to score it twice, like I did there, and that is the remnants that comes off there. And then once again, we'll try to remove any of the loose paint that is still on the surface there, because you don't want to just caulk right on top of that if it's unfurled. So you definitely want to use a coarse grit of sandpaper to sand that down, to sand down that hard edge, okay? So that when you go to re-caulk and repaint, it won't show up there. Okay, so this is a close-up look of after I sanded with the 60 grit Gator sandpaper. And I'm gonna use the big stretch caulk, and you definitely want to use this stuff. Don't use the Gap or the caulk from DAP. It'll just pull away, especially with the crown molding where it meets the ceiling. So the crown is being caulked now by the big stretch, and it's a white caulk. Okay, I'll lay down the bead. I'll use my finger to pull across it to leave a nice line. Now there's still some exposed wood in the middle of the crown that I want to caulk right on top of that to conceal that line where we just sanded down, because now once I caulk it, now it's smooth. And give the caulk some time to dry. I let it dry overnight, and now this is the next day. I'm using the Benjamin Moore, the Fresh Start primer, which is a great primer for this because it's real thick and it's going to hide a lot, and it's going to go on thick, and it's going to prime the caulk and the bare wood. Okay, so it's very important to prime that area where you had just caulked and sanded. You don't just want to paint right on top of that. Okay, so I'm cutting in against the ceiling area. Okay, and then I'll do the same to the area that is to the right of the repair. And you can see that I'm putting on a liberal amount of primer. I'm trying to go on thick so that the primer seals in the caulk or any of the bare wood that is remaining, and it builds up the surface. Okay, because once again, the Fresh Start is a high hide. It's a latex primer that's great for jobs like this. Okay, so now it's time to top coat. We're going to top coat with the Benjamin Moore, the Advanced Paint. Again, the Advanced Paint is a great paint because it levels out great. Okay, so I'm cutting in right on top of where I just primed, where the crown meets the ceiling there. Okay, and I'm going to first start with the top, and I'll feather that off, and now I'll reload back up and drag it further down towards the right of the crown, and then always feather back into what you did. Now I'll load back up, and we'll load up the bottom half of the crown here. Okay, and we're not doing the wall, so I have to be careful not to get any of the white trim paint that I'm using to paint the crown on the wall here. Okay, so you can see that I'm feathering off the Benjamin Moore, the Advanced, and it's a satin sheen. And now we're going to move to the right area, and I'm loading up the paint right now, and you can see how I apply it just shy of where the crown and caulk meets the ceiling. Okay, so I'll just work it ever so slightly up to that area. Okay, and that's always going to be a better technique than just to load up the brush and transfer it all into the corner. If you do that, it'll make a mess. Okay, so just slowly, just bring it up ever so slightly, and that way you won't make a mess, and it'll look a lot cleaner and tighter. Okay, so as you can see, I'm feathering back into what I just did there. Okay, so that's going to take care of that. So this is a look out of it after I just had repainted with the Advance, and you can see that it's still wet. It hasn't dried now. It's dried. This is probably like an hour and a half to 2 hours later. You can see how nice the Advance, it levels out even with a brush. Again, if you work fast with it, and if you feather it out, and if you feather it out by always going back into what you did. So thank you very much for watching. I'll see you on the next one.